you are fourth graders? Okay, couple of you. How many are fifth graders? And so the rest are sixth graders? All right, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Let me ask you one other question then. How many of you have ever had any kind of history class? Florida? Oh, okay. What grade are you all in to raise your hand with history? Seventh graders are here too?
Yeah.
It goes all the way up to 8th.
Okay, they told me fourth, fifth, and sixth. It goes all the way up to eighth. All right. So you all have had what history? You had Florida history and U.S. history? Okay, very good. Well, today we're going to be talking about some history, but mostly we're going to be talking about freedom, because this month is Freedom Month. And so I'm going to show you something about this. If I can make it work. Okay, on July 4th, that is also known as Independence Day in America. And how many of you, did any of you go to the swim in the harbor? Oh, yay! All right. Did any of you go to the fireworks at Fisherman's Village?
I think I got one.
You did your own fireworks? Did anybody have a picnic? Well, on July 4th, that's what Americans do. They get together to celebrate independence. And it's on this day from independence. We got independence from what? What empire? What country did America get? Yes, sir.
British.
Go. Oh, I love this group. You all are ready, ready, ready. I love it, love it, love it. All right, so take a look here. That's when we adopted our Declaration of Independence. Look at that. And how many of you are familiar with what the Declaration of Independence says? Please listen. What is it? What do you think it basically says?
It is the Declaration of Independence. I watched the movie on it. I forgot what it was, but it's a scroll that has American information on it.
Okay, very good. Now let's be very respectful of our classmates when we are all commenting, because we will ask you. So this is what the Declaration of Independence says, and I'm going to read it, and I want you to kind of listen carefully and take the words in. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed, given by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, rights that can't be destroyed, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, that was something that was written in 1776. However, some 87 years later, another document had to be written. And I wonder why, if we said all men are created equal and everybody should have these rights, why we had to have another document. Ms. Terry, can you maybe see why we had to have another document?
Okay, so anyone have an idea of why we needed another independence? Go ahead, back there.
Because new things were coming and new rules were needed.
What was committed?
Crimes.
I don't hear you.
New rules were needed.
New rules.
Yeah.
For what? What happened in America that we needed new rules for? Go ahead. Yeah. Did you say it louder?
Slavery.
Louder.
Slavery.
Did you hear him?
Slavery.
Who knows what slavery is? Oh, let me see. How many of you, raise your hand if you know what slavery is. Okay, who wants to explain what slavery is? Go ahead.
Slavery is where African Americans were captured and then sold. So I know of one type of how to capture them is that you would act like somebody that would take you overseas, and then at sea the wife would capture them and then take them off to a slave trade market and trade them and sell them. And so a slave basically, if you have a plantation or a farm, you work on the farm and you basically don't give them anything.
You don't give them anything. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
Little food and water.
That's wonderful. Yeah, go ahead.
They make them work.
They make them work. So what's wrong with making them work without any pay? That's the important part of what it is. Who would ever like to be a slave here? You would like that? No. Who would never want to be a slave? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's important. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Emancipation Proclamation and about some other things and about freedom. How important is freedom? Big, huh? Very important. Yeah, and we can talk more about it. Go ahead.
Right, thank you all. You all are really, you've been listening to your history. I love it. Okay, why was it necessary? And Miss Cherry, you all
forward,
actually
yeah.
told Miss Cherry why it was necessary. What it was a formal announcement calling for the freeing of slaves, and what's important, that were held in rebellious territory. And does anybody know who the rebellious territory were? What were those people called? They had their own system of government. They were, oh my goodness, you all are so smart. Yes, they had their own president and everything. And so this document, though, what it said was that if those states were in rebellion against the United States, that the enslaved people in those states would be free. All right, you all are so good here. I love it. Now, how many of you just heard about a special holiday that's just been proclaimed, Juneteenth? Some of you. Okay, what is Juneteenth supposed to mean? What's Juneteenth?
Where African Americans heard that they were free. Excuse me, from the Emancipation Proclamation.
In which state was that? Big state.
Texas.
In
Yeah,
Texas,
good, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Now, but let me ask you this. It's just become a law that Juneteenth, people get the day off and all of that, and some people inaccurately are saying that all slaves were freed. But were there still enslaved people on that date?
Yeah.
Oh, where were they? You know that.
Soviet Union.
Okay, in the United States. All right, I love you. I love you. In the,
Union territory, because when the Civil War happened, the America split in half. So technically still on the southern side, which is the Union territory.
all right, so we still had 4 states. We still had Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri, and then West Virginia. And over 225,000 people were still enslaved. So even that Emancipation Proclamation did not really free all of the enslaved. So, but there's something very special about the state of Florida. Have you heard about May 20th? Nobody's heard about May 20th. All right, I want you to remember this, because the Blanchard House will probably have we always have a special program, because in Punta Gorda, since the very, very first African Americans came here, we have celebrated May 20th as Emancipation Day in Florida. On that day, May 20th, 1865, General Matt Cook, with his Union troops, marched into Tallahassee and read the Emancipation Proclamation. And people just cheered, and they were free in Florida. On that day, 60,000 enslaved people were freed in the state of Florida. So I want you to listen out, because you might get the opportunity to write an essay about May 20th, or to be in a program about May 20th. You might get to be a little actor or actress in a program. So what we're going to let you know, we'll let the school district know, May 20th. And let me ask you, what happened on May 20th, 1865 in Florida? What?
60,000 enslaved African Americans are free.
I tell you all about the most brilliant group. You are just wonderful. No, you are. You are. I haven't been in a classroom with young people a long time, and let me say this to you. It is so refreshing to be with you. You have an energy that I absolutely love.
Can I
Love it.
ask a question?
You all know.
Let me ask him one question.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Why do you think it took 2 years? 2 years to free. It was 1863 when Abraham Lincoln signed, and it wasn't until 1865. Why do you think? Because why?
News didn't spread as fast back then.
They were still fighting there? Why do you think? Let me hear. Just speak louder. They were a big part of the economy. Yes, they were. They made the economy. The economy that was, yes, that's really true. And the owners probably didn't want to give them up.
And the Confederacy did not think Abraham Lincoln should be president. They had their president, so everybody didn't obey him. All right. Okay. Now, but this is what we want you to remember about today, about freedom. Everybody, every human being wants to be free to move about, to speak what's on their mind, to be able to take advantage of opportunities. Every single human being. Florida is special. I want you, because you're a resident of Florida, to understand how special Florida is. Now, believe this, 180 years before the Emancipation Proclamation, enslaved Africans, especially from South Carolina, were coming to Florida. Honey, if you could get across that St. Mary's River that separates Georgia and Florida, you could be free. So we had people escaping. People did not, there's a myth that the enslaved were just so happy and so childlike, and they just really like being slaves. That's a myth. Nobody wants to be enslaved. Nobody wants to be another person's property. And so what they did was to found what we call the Southern Underground Railroad. Now, in school, how many people learned about her? Who's that woman? Harriet Tubman. All right, everybody's heard about Harriet. How many of you have heard about the Southern Underground Railroad? Just one. Okay. This railroad is very important because it really pertains to us as a state. All right, now this is what people usually thought. Everybody, and this is true now, this is what happened. They had the abolitionists and everybody was going north. However, we had the Southern Underground Railroad. And these people said, okay, I don't need paper to free myself. I freed myself. And there were a certain group of people. And I'm going to tell you a story about those people. Those people freed themselves. Now, see this? This is where people were going up here, up north. But look here. See here? This is where these people went. They came through Florida. Some even went to the Bahamas. Yes, some went to the Bahamas because if Andrew Jackson was really wanting to get these enslaved people back in slavery, some of them were here in Florida, and he's coming. They went to the Bahamas. Yes, we have the descendants of enslaved people who went to the Bahamas. And so you see this? This is what the Southern Underground Railroad was like. All right, now check this out. This is amazing. Look at that date, 1687. We didn't have the Declaration of Independence until 1776. In 1687, this first group of Africans arrived in St. Augustine. And by 1738, there were 100 Africans living there in Fort Mose. Now, you're going to say, what was it about Florida? What was it? And this was what was the key. You know, like now, tell me the three nations that you hear about the three kind of empires that are competing with each other. We have the U.S., who else?
China.
China, and who else?
Russia.
Okay, so just like then, the empires were competing. And Florida was one of those territories that they wanted. Now, at this time, the Spanish had control of Florida. And in 1738, the Spanish governor said, if you come to Florida, if you can make it across the St. Mary's River, and if you will help protect the Spanish government, help protect our interests, Spain, you will be free. And so when that word got back to South Carolina, folks said, ha ha, we're heading for Florida. And guess what? The very first settlement of freed Africans in this country was in our state, in St. Augustine, Florida. The very first settlement of freed Africans was in St. Augustine, Florida. Now, why do you think I'm dressed like this?
You're a Native African American.
All right, I tell you, let me say that. I call myself, if you ask me my ethnicity, I say that I am an African indigenous because I do have African and I have Cherokee roots. I have some European roots as well, all right. But I'm dressed like this because I am a Maroon.
You're an Indian.
I'm an Indian. And guess what? As a Maroon, and I'm going to tell you more about how I connected with the Indians, as a Maroon, I was able to keep my African heritage. What kind of shells are these? Cowie, anybody? Cowie shells. So this is, when I left slavery, I still had some of my African with me, but when I joined with the Creeks, now the Creeks were they were Native American. When the Creeks and the Africans joined together, they made the Seminoles. And because we Africans and the Creeks had similar cultures, we combined. And so as an African Seminole, these are the kinds of clothes that I wore. So you see my Africanness and you see my Creek more Seminoleness. Yes, sir.
What's the necklace stand for?
This one, actually, the necklace, you're so smart. This necklace I got in Cuba. Yeah, because check this out. When the British came and pushed the Spanish out of Florida, all of the enslaved people and the Native Americans who helped them all went to Cuba, and they went to a place called Matanzas. If you go to Matanzas, Cuba, and you look in the records, you will see English names, and you say, what are those English names? They were the names of the enslaved Africans who went there. So this is from Cuba. Does anybody know Spanish? What does poder mean? What does this mean? It means power. And power is what the Maroons had. Yes, sir. Was I a slave? As a Maroon, yes. You mean me, the person who's here right now? I had descendants.
The costume first. I
Yes,
think
yes,
he means,
of the
yeah.
costume. Yes, by me wearing this costume meant that I was enslaved in South Carolina, but I was African, and when I joined with the Creeks to make Seminoles, we had the same values. Everybody knows what a value is. A value is what we think is important. And we have the same beliefs, things that we think are true. The one thing that held us together was that we both wanted freedom. The Creeks, who became Seminoles, wanted the freedom to have land and not to have it taken away by the Americans. The Africans, of course, wanted freedom not to be the property of anybody. But especially land was very important. You see, in both African and in Native American value system, land doesn't belong to a particular person. The Creator gave us land that everybody could use. And so Africans and the Seminoles, we all believe the same way, and so we joined together. So here he is. This man he was not playing. The Maroon was a resourceful black man who, having obtained his freedom, challenged any white man to take it from him. If his hideout was discovered, he was ready to die defending it. And everybody's heard of guerrilla warfare? All right, that's when you kind of hide in the bushes and that kind of stuff. That's what they engaged in. Now, the greatest threat to enslaved owners were Maroons. That was the greatest threat of all. Because what happened like when I escaped, some folks knew I was escaping. They gave me some food to take, gave me some red and black pepper to put down so the dogs wouldn't catch me. They told me just how to live, and so that said, well, if she escaped, I can escape too. And so other people came after me. Mostly it was young men, though, escaped. I happened to have wanted to have a child, and I didn't want my child to be born as a slave person, so I escaped with these 5 young men. But this is what's different about Maroons. The folks who would escape went up north, they wanted to become just a part of America. The Maroons wanted their own separate communities based upon their African culture. And I was just down in Miami several months ago, and I met the descendants of Seminole, some African Seminole Maroons. Some were from Oklahoma, some from the Bahamas, some from Texas, and many from Mexico. And they all still carried on their culture. Now, look up here, see if you see any, and look towards the bottom, see if you see any places that are familiar to you that you might think, yes, sir.
Sarasota, Pine Island.
Sarasota and Pine Island. Guess what, folks? That's where we had real Maroon communities. That's where I went first. I went to Sarasota, to Angola. And when Andrew Jackson came, I had to move. So I moved down to Pine Island. How many people know how close Pine Island to us? That's where we had a Maroon community. All right, we were trading with the Cubans. And when Andrew Jackson heard about this, that's when we left and we went to the Bahamas. So right here, close to us, Punta Gorda, we're between here. Sarasota, there was a Maroon community where I first went. And then when I had to leave there, I came right here to Pine Island. How many of you have ever been to Pine Island? It's a neat little place to go. It's very neat. All right. So that's how close they were. Now, this all began around 1776. You see the Maroon there. They weren't playing. Now, this was united resistance. It was Maroons and the Underground Railroad were there to challenge slavery. Believe it or not, when the Civil War ended, there were over 50 Maroon communities in this country, all the way from Virginia to Florida. People even in Virginia, when people escaped, they would go live in the woods so nobody would bother them, and they had Maroon communities. This lasted 2 generations. And African Americans the Seminoles played a major role in freeing Africans from enslavement. Now, the Second Seminole War was a major war. That was the largest, what we call the largest slave rebellion in United States history, because all of these enslaved people, many of them from Florida, joined with the Seminoles to fight the U.S. Army. And by the way, do you know which group of Indians has never been defeated? Who? The who? The Seminoles have never been defeated. They're the only group of Native Americans never defeated. Okay, here is the man, Gopher John. He was a major chief among the African Seminoles. He is the one who first, when the African Americans and the Seminoles first went to Oklahoma, and then they went to Texas, and people were still trying to enslave them. He set up an African Seminole community in Mexico. And so when I went to Texas to meet some of these people, and last month or so, you've got these African Seminoles who speak the Seminole language and they speak Spanish. So he took them there. Another person was King Philip. He was one of the major chiefs during the Seminole Wars. And this man is the most important man. If you hear the name Abraham, Abraham was what they call, the Indians call, a sense reader. What he could do, he was just really good at what he did. Because he could speak English, because he had been enslaved, he negotiated. This man, Abraham, negotiated with the American Army and with the United States government. He was the person that the Seminoles had as their interpreter, Abraham. Now, I think that it's very important for us as Floridians to celebrate Florida. We should be proud of Florida for what we did. America's first freedom fighters came here because Florida was the refuge for enslaved Africans. And so, would some of you like to know something more about the Maroons? They've got a fascinating story. Anybody want to know more? How about a little boy named Obi? There's a story about a little boy and his friends. Would you like to know more? All right, we'll get you, leave me your name and whatnot, and we'll make sure you get that book. And it's a fascinating story about young people who escaped from the plantation. Now, on Cooper Street, and Miss Marla here is going to be over there working with it. We are going to have an African American research library.
Thank you.
If there are any things that you need to learn about African American history and culture here in Charlotte County or in Florida or in the United States, come to Cooper Street, let us know. If you have a paper that you have to do you realize that at the Blanchard House, I have had 3 students from England to come to the Blanchard House to want to learn about African American culture. I'm talking about kids who came from England. So if they came from England, we'd love to have you come and learn more about African American history. And so you can visit our website. You can ask about our website. But mostly just want to say thank you for being here. And I just tell you, as a Maroon, how many of you think you'd like to hung out with me in the palmettos and with the rattlesnakes and mosquitoes when I was escaping? I know some of you would have. All right, if you read the book Obi, you'll see how we made it through storms and everything. The Blanchard House, we're closed right now, honey, because of the storm. It's at 406 Martin Luther King. So right now we're closed. But if you go to our website, you can find out, and we'll be in touch with you. We'll let Miss Donna, we'll let you know, especially about May 20th, okay? So you're interested. What do you think you'd be most interested in?